Today, we're going to be talking about how to build and sustain trust throughout the employee journey. Today's session is brought to you by none other than Bucket List Rewards, which is the #1 employee rewards and recognition program. It is also brought to you by Tango Card, the leading incentive delivery technology. My name is Jason Lindstrom. I am the CEO of Bucket List Rewards. And just as a quick introduction to myself, I've had the opportunity to build 3 high-growth startups, and culture and people and human resources has always been really near and dear to my heart. And over the years, I've had the chance to work with everything from Fortune 100 organizations like the Royal Bank of Canada, all the way down to startups. And I'm going to be sharing ideas and strategies that I've picked up along the way. I'd also love to take a moment now to introduce Rebecca Hathaway. She's the Director of Employee Experience over at Tango Cards. She was the first HR hire there when the company was relatively small, around 50 employees. Since that time, they've grown to many hundreds, and she's been there to guide the employee experience. So Rebecca, welcome, and I'm awfully excited to have you here today.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm really excited to chat with everybody and to hear what everybody else has to say as well.
Awesome. Next up, I'm going to talk about the agenda. So more or less, we're going to be sharing a few of the problems and opportunities we're seeing today. The bulk or majority of time is going to be spent sharing ideas and best practices and in conversation. And then at the end of today's session, we have some pretty cool special offers. I love interaction from the audience, so I'm going to be asking people to type answers into the chat window. So have the chat window handy. And if you have questions as we go through today's session, please feel free to add them to the Q&A window or to the chat window. And at the end of today's session, Rebecca and myself will be fielding those questions. So feel free to throw those in. So let's get into the problem or opportunity. I'm going to start off with a stat I'm sure many of you have heard before, or a lot of you have. Have many of you heard of the resignation boom or the great resignation boom? Yeah, a lot of you, I can see hands going up. Got it. Yeah, awesome. Yes, indeed. I wanted to start off with that as a stat. So maybe in the chat window, just for the fun of it, if you could put in or type in your best guess, what do you think the resignation boom is predicting for employee turnover? What percentage of staff is predicted to turn over? 36%, 20, 40, very smart audience, very smart audience. So the great resignation boom is saying between 40 to 50% of staff are considering leaving their current employer this year. I have in previous webinars surveyed staff and attendees, and what I've heard is that not everybody's obviously anticipating this as an outcome. But this is being largely driven by, of course, COVID, a lot of people working remotely, a lot of people taking early retirement. And by contrast, if you look at what's considered a healthy turnover, and this does vary considerably by industry sector, but it is approximately between 10 to 25%. Before I jump on into the employee journey side of things, Rebecca, do you have any comments or insights you might want to share on this?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing, especially with the great resignation boom, is a lot of leadership kind of acknowledging it, but not really thinking about ways you can either prevent it or at least be ready for it. So I think, encouraging, I know a lot of the folks on this call are HR professionals, really encouraging your leaders to recognize that this is probably coming, even if it doesn't, being prepared, being ready, and being open with your employees is going to really go a long way and in lessening this frustration that's coming along with this. Because we all know healthy turnover is okay. It's a good thing. But this is a large number of turnover. If you hit that 50%, that's a lot. And being prepared is going to be such a huge impact for everybody in a positive way if we're just ready for this to happen.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for that comment.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the next section, which is the employee journey. And that's where we're going to be spending the bulk of today's conversation. And what we've done is the journey can be broken up in a number of different ways, but for today's conversation, we're going to be talking about recruitment, onboarding, the first 90 days, and indeed the first year. Rebecca, I'd love to, again, invite you to get your feedback and commentary on this.
Yeah. So obviously, this is the first bit of the employee journey. If you have beyond this first year, I don't know if we're going to delve too far into that, but focusing on creating an environment during that first bit of the employee journey that really focuses on the human side of all of our employees and making sure that we're thinking through what it means to bring on somebody. It's really easy to, I would say, fill a seat, but it's not so easy to keep them in that seat and keep them engaged. And so, talking about this, let's jump into this first stage of the employee journey and what recruitments look like, what
Great.
recruitment looks like now in this COVID slash post COVID world.
I love it. I think that's a fantastic transition point. And we do have one more quick question, one more quick stat for
Oh,
the
yeah.
audience. And so again, I'd love for all the attendees to go ahead and just type in what you think the answer to this question is. So Rebecca just broke down or identified the employee journey is, it can be months to many, many years. But anybody want to take a guess as to what's the importance of the first 6 months? 80%. So yeah, so specifically, what percentage of new hires decide whether they want to stay with a company long term in the first 6 months? So lots of really good guesses, team. So I see 80%, 100%, 60%. Turns out it is 86% of new hires decide whether they want to stay with a company long term in the first 6 months. So obviously, the first 6 months are really key and very, very important. And with that, Rebecca, I think this is a great time to ask you and get your insights. What are some best practices and ideas you can share on the recruitment process?
Yeah, so I think we all have our recruiting processes pretty dialed in, right? You know exactly where you're getting your candidates, you're going through a specific flow, but COVID has made some changes to our daily lives and kind of given some really good insight into how we can make the recruiting process a little better, a little more human. Um, and one of the things that we've really leaned into is flexibility, and acknowledging that if you take a whole day out of your calendar to focus on interviewing, that can be really stressful for candidates. And allowing for flexibility and timing, maybe they stretch their interview over a couple of days, especially if they don't have to come to an office to interview, and being cognizant that if your recruiting team is not all on site, maybe you don't necessarily need to have this person come on site, and really focusing on what it looks like to the candidate, not just what's easy for you and your recruiting team. Um, we've also, when it comes to scheduling, really focus on things like bathroom breaks. We don't think about it. We're like, oh, you're home. Look at these back-to-back interviews that you're in. This is great. Um, Candidates may not be comfortable speaking up and, being really blunt, like, hey, I need to use the restroom. So building in, you know, 10 to 15 minutes between interviews, something that we may not think about in person, but it's really, really helpful in a virtual space to have them be able to turn their camera off, take a deep breath, step away for a moment, and have that time where you are able to just refresh. And one of the big things that we've also done is we used to take all of our candidates to lunch if they were interviewing over a lunch break. We'd have a nice lunch interview for them. We'd buy them lunch. It was a great opportunity to have a more relaxed setting. That can be really awkward over Zoom or Google Meet. But what we have done is sent a gift card to everybody who's going to be interviewing over a lunch period. And we are actually giving them that break, but also saying, hey, thank you for your time. We're going to buy you lunch. We send them a $20 gift card, um, right before or the night before their interview. That way they have time to just take that particular burden off their plate. They can order something like DoorDash, Uber Eats, what have you, using our product to say, okay, make sure that you're taking care of yourself during this. And I love Dr. Sam Jennings here, comfort breaks. That's a fantastic word. Just allowing folks to have that time to set up and really just focusing on, again, the human side. It's really easy to, I think, lose perspective when everything is virtual, and recognize that employee comfort and candidate comfort is going to go a long way in your recruitment process, and just acknowledging that bit as we're in the interview stages.
That's great. I love how you did indeed humanize the interview process and the idea of taking care of people so early on. Like I love observing and watching experiences and first experiences. And I think first impressions are so critical. And clearly, you guys are doing a lot to take care of that. Take care and create a great first impression. I'd
Yeah.
also like to share a couple of ideas that I've seen and that also we're currently implementing from our side. So the first, and this is probably one of my favorite ideas, and I can't take credit for this. I saw another organization doing it. Just to set it up, there's a great quote. I heard this from Reid Hoffman. He's the founder of LinkedIn, and he said, "If you want to sail around the world, don't divide your people into teams and send them into the forest to cut wood. Instead, teach them to long for the vast and endless sea." Said another way, I think it's really powerful sharing purpose, vision, and mission early on. So as a part of our recruitment process, before anybody gets a job, we actually share our vision with them. So when they apply for a role, we send them back our vision, and we invite them to read it over, to contemplate it, to think about it. We have our core values in there. It defines where we're going to be. I think it reads as a pretty darn exciting story. What I've heard back from applicants and candidates that we eventually hire is that it's so refreshing to see a company that actually has a vision, or has a vision that's being shared and being lived inside of the team. And then kind of as a super bonus point, something that I found that was really exciting, there's another company called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. What they had done is that every applicant who applies for the organization would automatically receive back the company vision. And at the top of the vision, it would say, if you're interested in working here, reply back, interview me. So all candidates would kind of have to read through and drink the Kool-Aid, buy into the vision prior to the application process. There's lots of different ways you can implement this, but we've had some insanely great feedback from various applicants. Something else that I wanted to share that has had a lot of good feedback is, again, we made one of our quarterly rocks to score very high on the onboarding staff. And so the exact rock for this current quarter is that 100% of staff being onboarded right now will give us a 9 or 10 out of 10 in the onboarding process. And we surveyed them at 30 days. And it's really exciting. It's not HR who owns this rock. It's actually the team leads and directors, so sales director, customer success director, et cetera. And it's created excitement, and I tell you, it's delivering the results. The new candidates being onboarded are excited. They're being given extra love, attention, and care. Awesome. To move on to the onboarding phase, which is a great transition. Rebecca, I'd love to hear what are some more best practices during onboarding.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know COVID has kind of brought to light is this idea of who's in the office, who's hybrid, who's home. And one of the first things that we've kind of decided in our onboarding process moving forward, we, meaning myself, the leadership, and my IT team, have decided that we're going to treat everybody as though they were virtual, so that we don't have factions of employees being onboarded in the office or factions being at home. And basically saying, hey, we're all going to create this lovely level playing field to onboard everybody in this way. And it's worked really well so far. And it creates this sense of belonging for everybody, because you're in this little cohort together, you're all virtual, but it's allowing folks, again, to have a feeling of normalcy if everybody's in that same boat. So I know a lot of folks, again, are looking at this hybrid in office, are we home, where are we, really being thoughtful about how you onboard. It's going to set a really, really specific tone for however these employees engage with you in the future. And then we've really been consistent also about onboarding gifts. We always sent everybody a welcome gift card using our product from day one. That's always been part of our DNA. And one of the things that we've done now is we've upped that to be part of your onboarding gift is also this work from home / hybrid stipend, where we send everybody kind of a larger gift on their first day virtually to say, thank you for joining our team. Here's what you're getting, and here's what we can provide for you. And also it allows them to see our product, which is pretty cool in and of itself. And so they get that on their first day, in addition to, of course, their swag kit and their equipment. And the idea is that all of this should arrive a little bit before or the day of their first day. That way, you know, you're keeping people jazzed, right? The onboarding process can be daunting, it can be scary. So keeping people happy and excited is a really, really nice way to continue the onboarding process. And one of the last things that we've really been consistent about that we've gotten great feedback on is the schedule. It's really easy to say, okay, onboarding is going to be this haphazard thing. HR did their thing, IT did their thing. But we're very consistent when we come in to say, the candidate has their schedule beforehand. Here's what it is. Here's when you can expect to meet with folks. And we go so far as to actually send the invites to their personal email as well. So they have them prior. And then, of course, when they're on site, we say, okay, now we're shifting these over to your work email. That way they know they're not going to be surprised with what happens. And having a detailed schedule for that first day, especially, but ideally that first week, gives them a sense of familiarity. It's going to give them a way to kind of relax a little bit and say, okay, here's where I need to be. Here's the time I need to be there. And not have to worry too much about what happens when the screen goes blank, right? When you're out of a meeting and you're new and you're at home. And so having that sense of purpose, having that sense of organization in your calendar has been really meaningful to our new hires. And I know that, Jason, I'd love to hear what Bucket List is doing or what you guys are seeing as well.
Yeah, no, what's interesting, I love, we've chatted about the stuff obviously previously, and I both like how we're really aligned around creating clear expectations on the first day. But I thought I actually think it's really cool. Tango's doing a ton of things to create that great onboarding experience. What sort of feedback have you heard specifically, or what from because you just shared a bunch of ideas, is there anything that has really stood out in the eyes of the new candidates being onboarded that they specifically or particularly really liked or appreciated?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces there. One of them is the onboarding gift. That's been really meaningful to folks. And just for full transparency, we do a $500 gift card on their first day
Yeah.
to help them kind of get situated and get settled. Um, so that's received a ton of really great feedback. And the other piece of feedback that I've gotten really consistently is regarding, you know, the presentation that we do with everybody from IT and HR has been really impactful, and saying, you know, that's the first thing they do is meet with IT, get their equipment set up, and then meet with HR to get the lay of the land. And that has been consistently the feedback I get there is, this is so great, it's so organized, and it really is meaningful because you have a set of people that you know that you can go to now. If you have those meetings right off the bat with IT and with HR, if you have a problem in those first 2 weeks, you know exactly where to go. And that's been a huge piece of feedback is, oh, I know someone, I have a face that I can put to this team. Let me reach out to them if I have trouble.
I love it. Yeah, it's that so we have many similar processes, and that's the same sort of things we've been hearing is people, we ask them afterwards, like, what did you think? And people love the clarity, because there's, I guess for a lot of people, or I don't guess, I know, when you're entering a new workplace, your high performers want to do a great job, but there's still a bit of anxiety and fear, like, what are expectations? What do I have to do? And the precision that you just shared, I know would relieve a lot of the anxiety for those new candidates. The one thing I might add that we've had some kind of interesting or really positive feedback on, that over on the right hand side is a sample welcome the first day welcome email, and it's really broken up hour by hour. And prior to somebody joining, we actually set up the first meetings to walk them through said agenda. But a couple of the fun things that we do, I think, that continue to add vision or add value to the first day is, in the first session, we walk them through the vision. And this is not the 3-year vision we shared as a part of recruitment. This is a really detailed 1-year breakdown of exactly where we want the company to be. And what I think is key and valuable here is we can set people up to understand how they contribute to the next year and, of course, the next 3 years. So how do we get alignment, excitement around the coming vision? And of course, we walk through some key tools and resources as well. Awesome. The one other thing I might share that we also walk through is the training plan or training milestones. And on our side, something that I found really helpful, again, is to give people weekly milestones. Like, what are the expectations for week 1? What would a win look like from their point of view? What does a win look like for week 2? This process is also this is obviously a spreadsheet that people can kind of walk through, guide themselves, check off the boxes, and there's people and resources to support them in said journey. But it also, one other bonus of this I find is it really empowers the new candidate to own their journey and to understand what success looks like.
I love that. We use a tool called Confluence as our intranet, and I know a lot of our managers will create this checklist for their employees in there and say, "Here's your checklist," and it'll at different people in the company to say, "Hey, you're going to meet with this new hire. Here's their checklist, so you can see how you can help them and be successful as well." So kind of looping in other employees into these fantastic training plans is such a good way for them to get to know people as well.
Yeah, and the human touch is so important. Being able to build those new relationships, build those new friendships. I love it. And speaking of new friendships and new relationships, that again is a pretty darn good transition. We do a daily team scrum, and we do both. In summary, we have a pretty large team at this point, and we break up the team into smaller breakouts where every single day staff members can talk about the top 3 goals. We also invite people to share a personal goal on a daily basis. It allows people to have like light conversation, to kind of break down barriers and silos, to see what it allows somebody from marketing to see what's happening over in product development or happening in sales. And most importantly, this is just a fun way for people to get together. This is an optional meeting, and it tends to run about 5 to 7 minutes long. But it is indeed a ton of fun. And then the one thing I'm sure many of you are used to or see now is just the idea of doing swag or sending out a swag kit to new candidates. I do want to share one story. I'm a big believer that if you just do everything 1%, 5% better, it does add up in the minds of new candidates. I had a chance pre-COVID to do a meetup with Slack. So Slack had come out to Vancouver, and they're talking about a bunch of the cool initiatives that they're up to. And Slack had the coolest Patagonia jackets with a nice big Slack logo. So I was like, I think we should copy that idea, and indeed we did. So we got some cool Patagonia jackets, and this year what we're doing now is every year we release a new bunch of swag. That way, it creates kind of a special novelty. So if you have the Lululemon swag, you know that you joined the company in 2021. If you have the Patagonia jackets, you joined in 2020. But I think this is just kind of one more fun and playful way to create culture. Awesome. So let's go a little bit deeper into the process. And let's talk about the first 90 days. And again, Rebecca, what are some best practices or ideas on the first 90 days?
Yeah, so obviously you shared that great training plan. I would say the first 90 days also should be an evaluation of that training plan. How did it go? What is your new employee thinking? How is that relating to their job performance? But on a more human level, one of the things that I do and my team does is meet with the new hires at their 90-day point, or roughly that time. I will put time on their calendar on their first day, or have somebody else on the HR team do that to sync up with that new hire and ask them how they're doing. I'm sure their manager will do it as well, but I think it's really meaningful for somebody on the HR team to reach out and acknowledge, like, hey, how are you feeling? Are you feeling good about where you are in this process? And are you feeling satisfied in your role? The first question I ask everybody is, how is the role compared to the job description that you read? Is it accurate? Are you feeling good about it? It's just a way for us to calibrate as an employer, but also to manage some of that trust with the employee. And again, reiterating, giving them a face to go to and a human side that they can go ask questions to when they have it. This is a great way to just get a pulse on the employees. It also allows us to get feedback on the onboarding process. I always ask folks, what are some pros and cons of the onboarding process that you experienced? That way we can make it better. So we're getting that feedback kind of beyond the honeymoon phase of the first 30 days, right? Because everybody in the first 30 days is like, oh my God, everything's amazing. But at that 90 days, maybe some of the new shininess is worn off and you're going to get a more honest answer, but it's still fresh in their mind, right? They're still remembering, okay, this is how this went. Here's a piece of feedback I have. And it allows them to ask questions that may have come up. Um, During that 90 days, we also really encourage people to check out our company meetings. So we as a company do a company meeting every single month. Um, so depending on when you joined, you're going to be introduced at, maybe it's your first day, maybe it's your first month. But we also encourage folks to go rewatch some of our older company meetings because we do record them. And so in that first 90 days, I always say, hey, if you haven't already, maybe check out the last couple company meetings and see what they're like, because it gives an idea of our culture. It's a share of knowledge of how we're doing as a company, which can be really helpful to a new hire, just to see where your goals are as a company and where they can start to see where they're fitting in. Whereas maybe that first month, it's hard to see where you fit in the organization sometimes. You're like, okay, conceptually, I understand all of this, but if you're looking at older company meetings, and again, we do ours monthly, so it's easy to say, okay, here's where my team fits and here's where I fit in regards to company goals and how we're doing. And that's been really, really helpful. And the last bit of advice or best practice I've learned, and this is something that I've heard in every single 90-day meeting that I've had with all of our new hires, is we have an app for Slack called Donut. I think Microsoft Teams has a similar app called Coffee Chat, and it allows people it syncs you up with a random person in the company for a 30-minute coffee chat. There's no agenda, there's nothing related to work. It's just to get to know people. And every single new hire me was like, this is the coolest thing. Please don't ever get rid of this. This is such a great way to meet people because it replaces that kind of organic conversation that might happen as you're going to lunch or as you're seeing people in the office. And it just is a way to keep people connected and allow new hires to meet people outside of their organization. Um, I just saw a question pop up. This is great. I was about to get there. For the donut things, we have people meet every 2 weeks, and it's a 30-minute meeting. It's optional. We allow people to, opt in or opt out, and it basically looks at two people's schedules and says, hey, you're going to meet with so and so. Here's some times on your calendar where you're both free. It does all the work for you. And then you just get to chat with somebody. And all of our leadership is even in there. And so you might suddenly find yourself in a coffee chat with David Leeds, our CEO. It happens and people love it. It makes the whole company approachable. And it takes the awkwardness out, right? Of saying, hey, you said a funny thing in this random Slack channel. I'd love to get to know you. That can be hard. So it takes that piece out for the employees, but still allows for a connection that is not necessarily work related. And it's just such a great tool, and I can't recommend it enough. I am not affiliated with Donut whatsoever, but I always recommend it in all of these chats as a tool to keep connectivity across multiple locations and teams and offices, as just a great tool, again, to encourage new hires in that 90-day point to say, let's branch out of just what you're doing on your team and actually meet people.
Awesome, Rebecca. We use Donut as well, and we've heard nothing but really positive feedback. And to your point earlier on, in my conversations when chatting with a variety of organizations, like since everybody's gone remote, they're trying to break down those barriers and keep people connected. And Donut's just a lovely and fun way to make that all happen. Hey, Rebecca, quick question for you. Do you provide any guidance or questions for those Donut meetings, or is it kind of like more of a free-flowing, just a casual conversation?
We want it to be casual, so we don't. If you're stuck, Donut actually will do a great thing. We'll give you a conversation prompt if you're unsure of how to start a conversation. It'll give you almost like an icebreaker question. I also encourage folks to turn your camera on, and if you have a kind of a more personal looking space, I don't know if you guys can see mine or not, but I have a lot of tchotchkes and little things in my background. And so it allows people to say, oh my gosh, what is that? And that is a great conversation starter as well. So I always like to have the camera on and just kind of see where the conversation takes you.
I love it. Camera on, don't have conversation starters, and I love
Yes.
frequency as well. I actually have maybe not for today's call, but I have a bunch of questions about your background. I've been intrigued since day one. I've been like, what is that about? What's going on over there? That's so cool. I might add just a couple of comments and maybe ideas from our side that we've seen. So we do something similar, very similar to Tango. Instead of a monthly meeting, we do we just call it a weekly huddle. So we're checking in weekly. We talk about how we're trending towards some of our KPIs like revenue targets, our launches, customer success. So there is some business talk in there for sure. And it's all about creating transparency and awareness, like how are we trending towards goals. I love the idea, like today's topic's about the employee journey. And I think almost every company is on a journey, right? You can be doing a journey up towards success, or maybe you're a little bit flat or maybe down. If you have an upward trajectory, I think that can be really exciting for people to get a sense of how the organization is trending towards that. And then in addition to that, we celebrate wins every single week. So we recognize employees for living the core values, and we shout those out. There's a pretty large volume of activity that happens. But we invite staff members to call out and recognize one another for doing good work. Why is that important? When employees are being recognized by their peers for doing good work and for living the company values, voluntary turnover can go down by more than 30%. Employee recognition is one of the biggest and best drivers from my experience in creating a safe environment and also creating an environment of high performance. And one other quick comment we do weekly one-to-ones between a manager and a team lead and the employee. It's called the goal set and review. Every single employee has 3-month goals. They also are able to set weekly goals. We have some really cool manager questions where on a weekly basis we're asking staff members how they're doing, what's their morale out of 10, what's the biggest contribution they've seen from one of their team members. We also invite them to put on the captain's hat and invite them for feedback on how we can make the company better. But we get a lot of great feedback on the GSNRs, these weekly one-to-one manager to employee meetings. Moving right along to the first year. Rebecca, back to you. What are some of the best practices, stories, and anecdotes you can share from the first year?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've started doing is, of course, anniversary rewards. We've always done those, but we started automating them recently. So as soon as it becomes 7 a.m. on your 1-year anniversary, you get a $50, we call it our reward link. It's one of our internal products. It's a gift card catalog option. So everybody gets that on their first anniversary, which is great. It just reminds folks like, hey, you've been here a year. That's super cool. We're also starting to explore stay interviews. We've been talking about them for a long time as a company, but we're big enough now that it makes a lot of sense. And so we're encouraging our managers to begin looking at what stay interview questions they'd want to have and leveraging tools that you already have. So if you have an engagement tool, we use 15.5, but something like Lattice or Tiny Pulse, there's a few other ones as well, where you can gather information over the course of the employee's year to say, how do you typically answer the question of how do you feel? We do a weekly check-in with our product called 15.5. This is just a way for managers and employees to sync up and see how things are doing in addition to their one-on-one. And this particular tool, 15.5, tracks that over the course of the year. So one of the things that we're starting to do as well is to look at the average score of your employee over the first year, look at trends, and talk about what that means. In addition to talking about what are the next steps in your career goal. Once an employee has been here for a year, they might be interested in a different role, a new role, or just growing in their existing role, and making sure that those conversations are happening. If you're, obviously we have a lot of managers who are really great about this. They're having these ongoing conversations, but if they haven't been happening, the 1-year point is the best time to start having them if they haven't already, and making sure that people know that they're not just stuck exactly where they are. Maybe they're happy, maybe they don't want anything, which is perfectly fine as well, but really encouraging and fostering the conversation of, you've been here for a year, what do you like, what do you want to see more of, and where do you want to go? Because employees often want to go somewhere, whether that's up in the same company or sideways. we want to make sure that we're giving them the tools to have those conversations.
Awesome. I only have one tiny addition to that. I love the annual check-in. I love getting clarity on where they want to go. As a part of our annual recognition, we provide gift cards that they can choose from and amongst. And something that I've seen be really powerful is to find out how people want to be rewarded, and then reward them in that way. For example, we have one of our developers, a fellow named Irfan, just hit his 5th anniversary, and he'd always wanted to go to the K2 base camp. And so that's where he's headed. He's actually based out of Pakistan in this example, and so it's a little bit easier for him to get to the Himalayas. For those who don't know, K2 is the 2nd highest mountain in the world. He's not going to summit, but he's going to go to base camp. But yeah, taking care of employees, whether it's something small or really big, 100% is a meaningful way to make them feel engaged and taken care of. It can be something really small, whether that's sending somebody to a brewery. We have lots of beer lovers on our team, for example. Maybe somebody happens to like just going to the spa, or maybe it's tickets to an NFL game like the Seahawks. And I've seen all of these deployed, and these have all been a pretty big hit, all depending upon the audience. So in my experience, ask your staff how they want to be rewarded, and then just reward them in that way. Next up, so I'll provide a quick recap of today's session. And I'm going to ask you again in the chat window, if you could type this in. So we talked about how to design a great recruitment process, how to design a great onboarding process, the first 90 days and the first year. For the attendees in the chat window, could you type in any takeaways or favorite pieces of information that you had? And I'll give you a second to type that in there. The 90-day meeting, donut, wonderful. The coffee chat, learning the coffee chat, sharing the vision early, the app, awesome. Ongoing check-ins, holy smokes. Rebecca, I feel like there's a ton of good takeaways. So I feel really excited. Donut was definitely a bit of a winner there.
I think Donut Starts needs to pay me a referral bonus. I think I need a referral bonus from Donut.
It's funny. We have no affiliation with them either, but
no.
The attendees love that tool and love that as a takeaway. Well, I'm really glad, everybody. In a few moments, we're going to be switching over to Q&A. I just have one more poll question, and of course the SHRM credit as well. So if you're interested in learning, I'm going to put on my Bucket List Rewards hat now. If you're interested in learning more about Bucket List Rewards, we are an enterprise rewards and recognition platform. We can automate and streamline peer recognition, manage our spot bonuses, employee anniversaries. I'm going to pop up a survey, and if you're interested in learning more, just click yes to a demo with Bucket List Rewards. And so you should see up on screen a little survey, and I'll give you a chance to fill this out. So a few more seconds. I can see a bunch of responses are still pouring in. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And then I'd also love for those who are interested, go ahead and launch the second poll, which is if you want to learn more about Tango Cards, please feel free to go ahead and click yes to this poll. And again, I'll give you a few seconds to fill the survey out. Wonderful. I can see tons of responses coming in. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Very good. And then we'll get to the SHRM credits. And so just a couple of more housekeeping items. So I had a few people ask during the session today, will the slide deck be shared? Yes, it will. We'll share the slide deck with everybody who attended. We also recorded the sessions, and we'll be sending out a link to that recording afterwards. And of course, here are the HRCI and the SHRM credits as well. So please take note of that. Excellent. And then lastly, let's just jump into a bit of Q&A here, which for many people is often the most fun part. So feel free to type your questions into the chat window or to the Q&A window. I can see a bunch of people have already made use of the Q&A window. So give me a second here. There's a lot of questions. And okay. So here's a great question that I've heard elsewhere as well. So this would be a great question for Rebecca. So
Yeah.
Tango has obviously built a great team. How do you scale culture successfully? So how do you scale culture successfully is a question.
Ooh, that is a loaded question. I think the first thing you have to do is recognize what your culture actually is. We hear culture a lot, and a lot of people have a hard time defining it. And I'm not necessarily going to define it here, but I'll tell you what it isn't. It isn't, oh, there's a coffee table or a shuffleboard table in the break room, or there's free beer and snacks. That's not your culture. Your culture is, how do people communicate? It's, how do people see value in their work? Do they feel valued? How are you acknowledging your employees? Those are aspects of your culture. And I think as we talk about scaling culture and what that actually means, you have to look about what is important in your culture that you want to keep. And things like, one of our company values is we value transparency and honest conversation. And that is, when I talk to people, one of the biggest things that they like about Tango Card. And so how do we scale that? How do we make sure that every employee has all the information and access to everything they could possibly need? So when we think about scaling that, it's, intranet confluence pages and sharing data and sharing ideas, or we have a culture of feedback. And recognition, because that is our product. We focus on, okay, part of our huge culture is we allow people to give employees $10 gift cards for going above and beyond. How do we scale that? What's the budget? What does it mean? And how do we track it? And so I think when you talk about scaling culture, ask what your culture is and what's important and why it's important. And when you make decisions based on that intention. And it's going to look different for every company, especially based on what parts of your culture you value. So I apologize. I know that's not necessarily a straightforward answer, but I think culture questions never are.
No, and regardless, I think that was a great answer. And next up, there's actually a ton of questions that have flowed in now, which is very cool. And a few are around budgets here. So I'm going to go in reverse order here, but Daisy had asked, I'd love to hear from panelists and attendees some low budget ideas for 5, 10, 15, 25-year anniversaries. I can kind of share some insights. So this is kind of a core area of our product / expertise, but if you're looking for really affordable ideas, there's often a lot of things companies do that have no hard costs necessarily associated with them. So paid time off, half day off, extended lunch, swag, very cool special exclusive swag. We work with the University of Texas Arlington, and they have a bunch of really cool rewards, but none have like a direct monetary value. And then from there, there's tons of different gift cards that I know are available. A lot of like a really rough rule of thumb is for years of service is typically sort of $50 to $100 per year of service. But I mean, like I've seen it cross the entire range. I've seen much lower than that, and I've seen much higher than that as well. But that's just my 2 cents. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to jump in there and give some insights.
Yeah. So at Tango Card, we actually have a set value. Every year you get a flat 50. And it's just ongoing to say another year of service. Thank you very much. We are looking at, now that we've been around long enough to actually have like the 10 and 15-year gifts, looking at what those could be. Because in the past, we've not necessarily, we were incorporated in 2009. So we're slowly getting to a point where, okay, we're hitting some of those bigger milestones. But we've seen a lot of really great feedback. We do a $50 reward link, which is a vast catalog of gift cards, so people can get whatever they choose to get. which is really fun. And we've had folks share with them before, and they customize it the way they want to. And so, for my personal example, I bought custom Nikes on my 5th year anniversary because I got a $50 gift card and that just felt right. I don't know. But it allows folks to have that choice. Because I also know, especially younger generations are moving away from the kind of standard gifts. I know there's a lot of like, oh, you get this etched glass crystal ball. Like, I don't, there's interest. Some people really value that, and some people are like, no, what am I going to do with this? So making sure that you're polling your employees and seeing what they want, and acknowledging that you're not going to please everybody, but if you're giving people, I know with bucket list rewards, there's a lot of choice involved. I think that's the way of the future, is giving people choices.
Yeah, and Rebecca, such a good comment. I'm just going to add to that a tiny bit. There's a question from Abby. When you talked about personalizing the recognition for the person who wanted a spa day or et cetera, how do you obtain their preferences? Just as Rebecca said, we survey them. We actually have a pre-built survey you can leverage. And maybe if you're interested, you can shoot me an email afterwards. We have a bunch of pre-built survey questions to find out exactly how staff want to be rewarded. You can easily build one of these on your own. There's tons of survey tools out there. We just happen to have some of those questions built out. And then Rebecca, there's one quick question. What was the MS Teams version of Donut called?
Oh, I believe it's just called Coffee Chat.
Coffee. I think we joked about it before. That's a very Microsoft name for a product.
Yep.
Awesome. Oh, and here's another one for you, Rebecca. Which programs did you mention for getting employee feedback?
Yeah, so we use a company called 15Five, and that's an overall engagement tool. And it does allow you to ask custom survey questions on a weekly basis to the whole company or to specific orgs. You can also use their pre-built questions, and you can gather a pulse over time. That's what we use. We've in the past also used Tiny Pulse, which asks a weekly or biweekly pulse question to the whole company. Great way to gather feedback. It also allows for anonymous feedback, which is really cool. And I believe Lattice also is a employee engagement tool that allows for survey tracking and survey data. I also know a lot of HR systems are starting to roll out survey data. So I would encourage you to, if you have an HRIS, to look and see if that option allows for survey tools. We've had great success with 15Five. It's scaled really well for us. But prior to that, we were using Tiny Pulse, which was also just really great for survey data.
Awesome. Thank you. And then for the for gifts, I know I think both Rebecca and I have can provide commentary on this. For gifts, organizations allow for charitable giving in place of a gift. From our point of view, yeah, 100%. There's we actually do a ton of work using the Tango product, and they have lots of great charities available on their platform. And in addition, sometimes companies will have a charity of choice, and I do think that's a really good idea to support that. And if you really want to double down, finding out charities that might be meaningful to your employees and supporting those, that's next level, right? That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that just a little bit since you did mention us. We do actually, with our Tango Card reward link program, one of the things that you can do is donate the full amount that you've been gifted as a charitable donation. And we work with a company called Charity on Top. So even if you don't see like your particular organization of choice that you'd like to donate to, Charity on Top has, I think it's like over 5,000 charities that you can donate to. So we always encourage folks to do that. And we do see a lot of people do that with their rewards to gift them. I know last time I checked, it was the Humane Society was like our big one that we see a lot of donations to.
That's awesome. And I think we've made it through the bulk of questions here. And I, in the spirit of being respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to move to start closing today's meeting. So first, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the attendees for joining. Also, Rebecca, thank you for all the ideas and insights. It was so
Absolutely.
cool. The feedback from the people who joined today's call. Clearly, there were some good ideas in today's session. Rebecca, is there any final note or comment you might want to leave the attendees with?
Um, no, I think just making sure, again, I think the big theme of today is being mindful and cognizant of what your employees are going through and remembering that even though they're behind a screen, there's still a person there. And I think everybody's done a great job of really focusing on that and continuing to focus on that moving forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Rebecca, I think that is a perfect way to end today's session. I know you can see the comments in the chat, but I just want to read a couple out because clearly
Yeah.
the notes and messages were resonating. So Sarah Frost said, really cool. I love that you can donate. Kelly said, great info. Thank you so much. Kim Schweitzer said, thank you. That information was very inspiring. So lots of great thank yous. But thank you, the attendees. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you all.